This is just paper, Grandma. My granddaughter's husband swept my gift off the table at her baby shower, so I made one phone call. My granddaughter's husband knocked my envelope off the table like it was a piece of junk mail. Not an accident. He looked right at me when he did it. The envelope hit the floor, slid under the gift table, and landed face down between a pink bow and a crumpled piece of tissue paper. Around the room, 40 guests went quiet for exactly 2 seconds. Then someone laughed, and the party moved on. I bent down and picked it up myself. That night, I made one phone call. By the following Monday, everything had changed. But let me start from the beginning. Hey, quick question before we go further. Have you ever given someone a gift from the heart and watched them treat it like garbage? Drop a yes or no in the comments. I read every single one. And if you're new here, hit subscribe. Stories like this one, they're why this channel exists. Now, back to what happened at that baby shower. My granddaughter, Melissa, is 31 years old and the only grandchild I have left. Her mother, my daughter, passed from cancer 11 years ago. Since then, it has been the two of us, Melissa and me. I raised her through the grief, through college applications, through the years when she cried herself to sleep, and I sat outside her bedroom door in the hallway with my back against the wall and my hands in my lap, just so she'd know someone was close. I am 67 years old. I have worked as a hospital custodian for 22 years. I clean operating rooms, patient wards, and hallways that smell like antiseptic and fear. I work the early shift, 5 a.m. to 1 p.m. Netens, which means I am up at 4 and home before most people eat lunch. My coworkers call me June. My supervisor has written me up for commendation 3 times. I wear the same gray uniform every day, and I drive a 2009 Honda Civic with a crack in the passenger side mirror that I have been meaning to fix since 2021. Melissa met Derek Colton 2 years ago at a work conference in Chicago. He is 35, works in commercial real estate development, and comes from a family in Connecticut that still talks about the summer homes they sold in the 90s like it was a national tragedy. He proposed after 8 months, and Melissa called me from the parking lot of the restaurant where it happened, crying into the phone, telling me he was the one. I listened to every word. I told her I was happy if she was happy. I was not sure what I was. There is a difference between a man who loves your granddaughter and a man who loves the version of your granddaughter that fits neatly into his life. Derek was polite to me in the way that people are polite to someone they do not intend to know. He called me Mrs. Patterson at the wedding, even though I had told him twice to call me June. At the rehearsal dinner, he introduced me to his parents as Melissa's grandmother. She works at the hospital. Not a nurse, not a doctor, just at the hospital. His mother smiled with her mouth. Melissa noticed none of this. Or maybe she did, and said nothing. Either way, I kept my thoughts where they belonged. Inside my chest, behind my ribs, quiet. The baby shower was held at the Colton family property in Westport, Connecticut. A sprawling white colonial with black shutters and a catered event on the back lawn overlooking Long Island Sound. 40 guests, most of them Derek's family and their circle. Women in linen dresses carrying gifts wrapped in paper that cost more than my electric bill. I drove up from Baltimore in my Civic, 3.5 hours, parked at the far end of the gravel drive, and walked in carrying my envelope. Just an envelope. White, letter-sized, sealed. Inside was something I had been holding for Melissa since the year her mother died. A savings account, not a passbook this time, but the full printed statement from Harbor Trust. Her name as beneficiary, my name as account holder, opened in 2013 with $200 and added to every single month since. $22 here, $40 there, sometimes more if I picked up an extra shift. Every Christmas, every tax return, every birthday where I told myself I didn't need a gift. 12 years of deposits. The current balance at the time of the shower was $414,000. I had planned to tell her privately, pull her aside, hand her the envelope, explain what it was and what it meant. But when I arrived, Derek intercepted me at the door, shook my hand, said, "Glad you made it," and steered me immediately toward the buffet table like I was a distant aunt who needed to be managed. By the time I found Melissa, she was surrounded by Derek's mother and 3 of her sisters-in-law, all of them exclaiming over a silver rattle from Tiffany. I waited. I am good at waiting. The gift opening started at 2 o'clock. Melissa sat in a white wicker chair decorated with eucalyptus, and Derek stood beside her, handing her gifts from the table. They had a system. He would announce who each gift was from. Melissa would open it. His sister would hold it up for photos. His mother would write it in a thank you list. I sat in the 3rd row of garden chairs and watched the whole production. When they got to my envelope, Derek picked it up, glanced at it, and said in a voice loud enough to carry across the lawn, "This one's from Melissa's grandma." He said it the way you'd say this one came without a return address. Then he handed it to Melissa, and before she could even break the seal, he said, "And I want you to hear this clearly. Is this a card, Grandma? No gift inside?" And he laughed. Not a short laugh, a laugh that invited other people to join. 2 of his cousins laughed. His mother covered her mouth with her hand. Melissa went pink and said, "Derek," in a voice that meant stop but didn't mean it enough. Then Derek picked up the envelope by its corner, the way you pick up something wet, and set it off the edge of the table. Not through. Set. Deliberately. And said, "Let's keep the table clear, yeah?" And reached past it for the next gift. The envelope fell, slid under the table, landed face down. I stood up, walked to the table, bent down and picked it up. I did not say a word. I put it in my cardigan pocket and sat back down. Melissa was already holding up a stroller travel system in pale sage green. Derek had his arm around her. His mother was writing something in her notebook. No one looked at me. I stayed for another hour. I ate a small plate of food I don't remember tasting. I kissed Melissa on the cheek when I left, told her she looked beautiful, and walked back down the gravel drive to my Civic. I drove 40 minutes before I stopped at a rest area on I-95. I sat in the parking lot with the engine running and the envelope on the seat beside me. Then I drove the rest of the way home. That night, I sat at my kitchen table in Baltimore, in the house I have rented for 19 years on Calvert Street. 2 bedrooms, 1 bath, a back porch where I grow tomatoes in the summer. I made a pot of chamomile tea, and I put the printed bank statement flat on the table in front of me. $414,000. 12 years of choosing Melissa over myself every single month. I looked at it for a long time. Then I thought about Derek Colton's hand setting that envelope off the edge of the table, like it was in his way. I was not angry in the way that makes you loud. I was angry in the way that makes you very, very still. I picked up the phone and called my attorney. Margaret Chin had been my attorney for 14 years. We met when I bought the Calvert Street house, except I did not buy just the one. That is the part most people do not know about me, including Melissa, including my coworkers, including everyone who has ever looked at my gray uniform and made a quiet assumption about the shape of my life. In 2001, I was 43 years old and cleaning hospital floors on an early morning shift when I overheard 2 administrators in a break room discussing a foreclosed row house on North Durham Street. They were laughing about it. They said nobody would buy it. Not in that block, not at that price. I walked out on my 15-minute break, called the number on the listing from the parking lot on a payphone, and made an appointment for that afternoon. I bought it for $68,000 with money I had been saving since my daughter was born. I fixed the plumbing myself using a library book. I repainted the interior on 3 consecutive weekends. I rented it to a family for $900 a month. When they moved out 3 years later, I raised the rent and found new tenants. When I had saved enough from the rental income, I bought another house. That is how it started. Row houses, mostly. Baltimore, some in the surrounding counties. I never bought anything I could not afford to lose. I never overpaid. I kept every property in a limited liability company called JLP Holdings, my initials. I used Margaret to handle the paperwork, and I told exactly no one. Not because I wanted to hide it, because I wanted to know who people were when they thought I had nothing. By the night of the baby shower, JLP Holdings owned 23 properties. The combined appraised value, according to the report Margaret had sent me the previous quarter, was slightly over $8 million. The savings account with Melissa's statement in the envelope on my kitchen table was separate from all of that. Money set aside just for her, her mother's daughter, kept in a different account in a different bank because it was meant to be hers and no one else's. Margaret answered on the second ring. "June, everything all right?" I told her what happened, not with emotion, just the facts, in order. The way I report anything, what occurred, when, who was present, what was said. Margaret listened without interrupting. When I finished, there was a brief pause. "What do you want to do?" she asked. "I want to know everything there is to know about Derek Colton," I said. "His finances, his business dealings, his company's history. Everything public record will show and anything a good investigator can find that's legal to look at." Another pause. "You think there's something there?" I think a man who dismisses a sealed envelope without knowing what's in it is a man who's used to things working out for him regardless. I looked at the bank statement on the table. I want to know if they're actually working out. Margaret said she knew someone, a firm in D.C. that handled due diligence work. Thorough, discreet, expensive. I told her to make the call. 8 days later, I was sitting in Margaret's conference room when a woman named Rachel Osei set a manila folder on the table in front of me. Rachel was 40, precise, spoke in measured sentences. She had been doing investigative research for 11 years. She opened the folder without preamble. Derek Colton's listed income was $212,000 a year as a director at Meridian Development Group. His lifestyle, downtown Chicago condo, club memberships, the lease on a Range Rover, tracked with that income, at least on the surface. But Rachel had found something interesting in the business filings. Meridian Development Group had 2 active projects. One was a mixed-use residential development in the River North area of Chicago, currently in the permitting phase. The other was a smaller commercial redevelopment in Evanston. Both projects had investors, private individuals, and 2 small funds, all of whom had signed subscription agreements based on projected timelines and returns that, Rachel explained carefully, did not match the actual status of the projects. The River North project, Rachel said, setting a document in front of me, has been represented to investors as 60% through the permitting process since January. The permits are, as of last week, not approved and not on schedule. Or say, I looked at the document. What does that mean for the investors? It means they were given materially false information when they signed their agreements. There are 12 individual investors. Total capital committed, $3.4 million. I sat back. Does my granddaughter know any of this? There's no evidence she's involved in the business or had access to investor communications. Her name doesn't appear on any of the filings. I was quiet for a moment. Around us, Margaret's office hummed with the sound of a very old building trying to stay warm. What happens, I said, when investors start asking questions? Rachel folded her hands. If the permits don't come through by Q4, they will. And when they do, this gets complicated for Mr. Colton very quickly. I looked at the folder. I thought about Melissa, 8 months pregnant, sitting in a wicker chair on a lawn in Connecticut, holding up gifts wrapped in paper that cost more than my electric bill. I thought about a man's hand setting an envelope off the edge of a table. I thanked Rachel for her time. I asked Margaret to retain copies of everything. Then I went home and I started thinking about what to do next. There are two ways to protect someone who doesn't know they need protecting. You can tell them and hope they listen. Or you can wait until the truth arrives on its own and make sure you're standing nearby when it does. I had tried the first option before. When Melissa was 24 and dating a man I did not trust, I said something once, carefully with evidence. She didn't speak to me for 3 months. She came back eventually. He left eventually, but I had learned something about the order in which things need to happen before someone can hear the truth about a person they love. So I waited. And while I waited, I did something else. I called my property manager, a woman named Dolores Braxton who had been managing my Baltimore properties for 9 years. I told her I was thinking about expanding. I had been watching a stretch of properties in the Remington neighborhood, a block of 6-row houses that a developer had picked up cheap in 2019 and never renovated. They had been sitting vacant. The owner had been trying to unload them for 2 years. I had been watching the price drop. I made an offer the following week. Through JLP Holdings cash, 17% below asking. They accepted within 48 hours. I tell you this not to talk about real estate. I tell you this because while Derek Colton's professional world was beginning to crack at its foundation, I was building something. That is the rhythm I have kept my whole life. When something falls apart around you, you build. You do not wait for the debris to settle. You start laying the next foundation while the dust is still in the air. Melissa called me 6 weeks after the baby shower. It was a Tuesday evening, and I was on my back porch pulling the last of the late tomatoes when my phone rang. Grandma. Her voice had that specific quality I had not heard since she was 19, and her mother had just died. Thin, like it might break if touched wrong. I'm here, sweetheart. A long pause. Outside, I could hear the neighbors' wind chimes. Something's going on with Derek's work. He won't tell me what. He's been on the phone at 2 a.m. His business partner came over last week and they sent me upstairs. A pause. I'm 8 months pregnant and they sent me upstairs, Grandma. I set the tomato down on the porch railing. Have you asked him directly what's happening? He says it's fine. He says it's just a timing issue with a project, but he's... She stopped. He's scared, I can see it. Derek doesn't get scared. I chose my next words carefully. Melissa, I need you to do something for me. What? I need you to find a good family attorney, not Derek's family's attorney, your own, someone who represents only you. Silence on the other end. Grandma, why would I need... Because you're about to have a child, I said. And an independent attorney is something every woman should have before that happens, regardless of what her marriage looks like. This is not about Derek. This is about you having someone in your corner who answers only to you. Another pause, longer this time. You know something, I breathed. I know that you are 8 months pregnant, that your husband is keeping things from you, and that you should not be navigating whatever comes next without your own legal counsel. That's all I'm telling you tonight. She was quiet for a moment. Then, okay, call me after you meet with someone. I will. A pause. Grandma, I'm sorry. About the baby shower. About the envelope. I never got to... We'll talk about the envelope when the time is right, I said. Right now, you find yourself an attorney. That's the only homework you have. She almost laughed. Almost. Yes, ma'am. We hung up. I sat on the porch until the light was completely gone. The investors filed a formal complaint with the Illinois Department of Financial and Professional Regulation 9 weeks later. I know the date because Margaret called me the morning it was reported in a Chicago business publication. 3 individual investors had submitted documentation citing misrepresentation of project status and timelines. A fourth investor, a retired contractor from Oak Park who had put $400,000 into the River North project, had separately retained his own attorney. Derek had 2 weeks before the story moved from a business filing to a business page item to something Melissa could no longer not see. I drove to Chicago. I did not tell Melissa I was coming. I booked a room at a hotel 6 blocks from their building, and I arrived on a Thursday afternoon. I called her from the hotel lobby. "I'm in Chicago," I said. A pause. "What? Why didn't you—" "I wanted to see you. Can I come over?" She came and got me herself, walking slowly, 40 weeks pregnant, wearing Derek's sweatshirt and her hair back in a bun. When she saw me in the lobby, she stopped, and then kept walking and hugged me with both arms, and I held on. We took a cab to their building because she insisted the walk was too far. In the elevator, she said Derek was at a meeting and probably wouldn't be back until evening. I said that was fine. I said I wasn't there to see Derek. She had found an attorney, a woman named Priya Cannon, who specialized in family law. They had met twice. Melissa told me about it with her hands in her lap, looking at the floor. "Priya said things I didn't want to hear," Melissa said. "What kind of things?" "That I should understand the difference between marital assets and what was Derek's before the marriage. That I should have my own accounts with my name on them. That I should know what our financial situation actually is. She looked up. "I didn't know, Grandma. I didn't know any of the specifics. Derek handles everything. I never thought to ask." I looked at my granddaughter sitting across from me in her own living room, and I thought about her mother sitting across from me in my kitchen at 22 years old, saying she needed to tell me something. Different women, different troubles, same expression, like they already knew the answer and just needed someone else in the room. "I have something to tell you," I said, "and I need you to listen all the way through before you respond." She nodded. I told her everything. The savings account opened in 2013. 12 years of deposits. The $414,000. Then JLP Holdings. The 23 properties. The $8 million in appraised value. All of it. Laid out in plain language, in the right order, without apology. Melissa did not speak for a long time after I finished. When she did, her voice was very quiet. "All this time. You drove a 2009 Civic. I still drive it. It runs. Grandma," she pressed both hands to her face. "You let Derek—" She stopped. "At the baby shower, when he knocked the envelope off the table, you were sitting there with—" She couldn't finish the sentence. "I was sitting there with exactly what you needed," I said, "and I was finding out exactly who he was." She started to cry, not loud, not dramatic, the quiet kind that means something has settled somewhere deep and cannot be unsettled again. I moved to sit beside her and I put my hand over hers, and I did not say anything else for a while. Derek came home at 7:15. He walked in, saw me on the couch, and did a very small thing with his face that he controlled quickly. "June," he said, "I didn't know you were in town." "I came to see Melissa," I said. He set his bag down. He looked between us. He had that quality of a man who senses the shape of a room has changed and is trying to figure out where to stand in it. "Everything okay?" "Not entirely," I said, "but it's going to be. Sit down, Derek. There are a few things we should talk about." He sat. I told him what Rachel's report had found. Not all of it. Margaret had counseled me carefully on what could and could not be said without legal exposure, but enough. Enough that the color left his face. Enough that he stopped looking at me like I was someone he needed to manage and started looking at me like someone who had just understood something very important about the last year of his life. "This is going to become a matter of public record shortly," I said. "Your investors have already filed with the state. This is not a question of if Melissa finds out. It is a question of whether she finds out from you first or from a headline." Derek looked at Melissa. She looked at the wall. "I didn't mean for it to go this far," he said finally. "The permits, the timeline got away from me, and I thought I could fix it before anyone noticed," I said. He didn't answer. "Derek," I kept my voice level, "I am not here to decide what your marriage does with this. That is between you and my granddaughter. I am here to make sure Melissa has everything she needs to make whatever decision comes next from a position of complete information, not from a position of depending on you to tell her the truth. From her own position." He was quiet for a long time. Melissa spoke first. "I want you to leave," she said to him. Not shouted, flat, like a door closing. He left that night. He took a bag and went to a hotel. His attorney called Priya 3 days later. The baby came on a Wednesday morning in November, 4 days after Derek moved out and 12 days after the Illinois regulators issued a formal notice of investigation into Meridian Development Group. Melissa called me from the delivery room. I drove from Baltimore in 4 hours and walked into the hospital while the sun was still low and found her holding a daughter, 7 pounds 2 ounces, wrapped in a white blanket with a thin pink stripe. The baby had Melissa's mother's mouth. I recognized it immediately. We sat together in that room for a long time, just the 3 of us. Melissa named the baby Clara. She said she had chosen it the week before and hadn't told Derek. When she told me that, she looked at me with an expression that was not quite a smile, but was something better. The look of someone who had made their first fully independent decision in a very long time. I stayed in Chicago for 3 weeks. I slept on Melissa's couch. I made dinners. I held Clara at 3 in the morning so Melissa could sleep. I showed Melissa how to read a lease agreement and how to look up property records online and what the difference was between an operating account and a reserve fund. Not because she would become a property manager, because knowledge is what you carry with you when everything else has to be put down. On the day I drove back to Baltimore, Melissa walked me to the parking garage. She was moving more easily, Clara in a carrier on her chest, the baby's small face turned toward her neck. "The envelope," Melissa said when we got to the Civic. "I still have it," I said. "I want to know what's in it." I had the printed statement in my bag. I had brought it because I knew she would ask. I handed it to her. She unfolded it, read the number at the bottom, and stood there in the parking garage holding it in one hand with her other hand flat against Clara's back. "Grandma," her voice broke on the first syllable. 12 years, I said. "Your mother's daughter, not a dollar touched." She folded the statement carefully and handed it back to me. "Keep it for Clara," she said. "I want to earn mine." I looked at her for a moment. Then I put the statement back in my bag. "Okay," I said. She hugged me with her free arm, Clara pressed between us, warm and small and entirely unaware of any of it. I drove home, and I thought about the Remington properties the whole way back. Dolores had sent me preliminary renovation estimates. 6-row houses, solid bones, good block, walking distance to 2 schools and a bus line. I had been thinking about what to do with them since the purchase. Affordable rental units, long-term tenants, families like the ones who had rented my first property back in 2001 before I knew what any of this would become. I had a contractor starting the following Monday. There is something I want to say to you before I go, something I spent a long time learning. I worked the early shift at the hospital for 22 years, and I watched people come and go. Doctors, administrators, patients, visitors. In my uniform, with my cart, I was invisible to most of them. I was the woman who emptied the bins and sanitized the floors and was gone by the time the day shift arrived. What they could not see was that I was also the woman who, on her way home from that same job, stopped at Margaret's office to sign documents for a new property. That I had been building something quietly, steadily, for 2 decades. That the woman mopping the floor was the same woman who owned the row house where 3 of those doctors' nurses rented apartments. I do not say this to feel superior to anyone. I say it because I spent years carrying two truths at once, the truth of the uniform and the truth underneath it, and the weight of that taught me something. Other people's assumptions about you are not your responsibility. Your responsibility is knowing your own worth and using it for something that matters. Derek Colton looked at a sealed envelope and decided he already knew what was inside. He didn't. Most people don't. What I gave Melissa wasn't money. What I gave her was what I gave myself at 43 years old, standing in a parking lot on my break, calling a phone number I wasn't sure I could afford to call. A chance. The belief that the next thing you build might be the one that changes everything. Clara is 4 months old now. Melissa sends me photos every few days. The baby discovering her hands. The baby asleep on a blanket in a square of afternoon sun. Melissa is back at work part-time and has started asking me questions I love to answer. What do I look for in a tenant? How do I know when to walk away from a deal? What did I do the first time something broke and I didn't know how to fix it? I tell her the truth every time. I looked it up. I asked someone who knew. I made the call even when I wasn't sure. She's learning. That is all I ever wanted. And to whoever is listening to this right now, if someone has ever made you feel like what you carry isn't worth anything because it doesn't look like what they expected, hear me. Keep it. Take care of it. Build with it. Because the people who dismiss what they don't understand are not the ones who get to decide what it's worth. You are. Don't forget to subscribe to Topaz Revenge for more stories about ordinary people who turned quiet strength into something extraordinary. And if this story hit close to home, share it with someone who needs to hear it today.